In a medium that's becoming more and more infatuated with seasonal anime, it's rather rare to come across a series that is ambitious enough to dedicate 4 seasons to a single story, let alone one that's coming from a light novel. So when I heard that the Sword Art Online Alicization arc would be getting at least a year's worth of anime episodes, that was the first sign that perhaps we could be optimistic. And after finally catching up to the latest episode from the third core of Alicization, War of Underworld, I can truly say that I'm not disappointed in the least with what I've experienced so far. I would even go so far to say that War of Underworld is the best anime to come from fall 2019. Yeah, even more so than My Hero Academia or Dr. Stone. Maybe not Vinland Saga, but it's definitely up there. Now, to you or someone who hasn't watched Sword Art Online since it ended back in 2014, you probably have only been exposed to the stigma that surrounds its lackluster predecessors. I mean, it seems like everyone just shits on Sword Art Online for the sake of shitting on Sword Art Online. Personally, I thoroughly enjoyed the first season as a means of entertainment. Then, since I'm a huge fan of first-person shooters, Gun Gale Online exposed me to what I imagined my dream video game would be like. It was such a new and enthralling concept that I completely overlooked any of the flaws with the story or the pacing. But if anyone was to ever express a positive interest in this series, then they'd immediately be outcast as a mainstream normie who has bad taste and a complete lack of standards. At the time, it was by far the most polarizing topic in the anime community. And I think that the bad reputation it gained from the first 2 seasons has gone on to hinder the general public's perception of the current season, thus preventing people from experiencing an anime that is actually pretty damn good. So I'm here to tell you why you should be watching Sword Art Online Alicization. I guess the first place to start would be with what it's about. Well, Alicization serves as a continuation to the first 2 seasons and ordinal scale movie. Little by little, we've slowly been introduced to concepts and ideas that formulate this grand plot that we now experience in Alicization. Although these heavily tech-based concepts had taken a backseat to the larger plot elements, they were always in plain sight the entire time. And the culmination of everything we've been exposed to so far is cleverly integrated to enrich the plot of Alicization. Season 1 introduced us to the first mass-produced full-dive virtual reality technology known as Nerve Gear. Then, after the Aincrad incident, a safer version known as Amusphere was developed and introduced in Season 2. At the end of Season 2, a new generation of full-dive technology was developed for the medical field, this being the Medicuboid. All of these served to help develop the 4th and final generation known as the Soul Translator, the primary full-dive machine that we see used in Alicization, a machine that is capable of connecting to what's essentially the user's soul rather than their brain, with the soul being this scientifically proven component within the human body known as a fluctlight. Now, unlike other machines, this one was not made for public use. Its purpose was for a private government project formerly titled Alicization. The goal of this project was to use the Soul Translator to essentially create an artificial intelligence that was built off a copy of a real human's fluctlight. Wrath, the organization responsible for overseeing Project Alicization, would use the seed from Aincrad to create a VR world that would nurture the development of these artificial fluctlights, a world known as Underworld. So, right from the get-go, it already brings into question whether these artificial souls can be considered alive or not. Do they have the capability to make decisions of their own free will, or is their existence one that is ruled by the code that they are based off of? Even though they were technically created by man, if they come to have the same essence of what makes us human, does that not make them equal to the rest of us? That question refers to an underlying theme that slowly becomes more prominent as the story continues. Anyway, the first half of this series follows one of these artificial fluctlights as well as Kirito, who has been placed into the underworld due to various reasons, which means the harem's already been cut out in order to focus on the relationship between Kirito and his newfound friend. The two will travel together on an extensive journey throughout the underworld, each pursuing their own goals, but both will end up challenging the rule of law that's been set in place by a being who's essentially the world's administrator, a fluctlight that gained powers far beyond what the average person would normally possess in the underworld. A key thing to note though is that throughout all of this, Kirito is not overpowered. In fact, he'll encounter several close calls and even take a couple of losses throughout his journey. Him and his partner are by no means just stomping all over every enemy they come across. Fights actually build tension, and you can see the thought process that goes behind creating a strategy that allows them to get the best of their opponent. Much of their journey is in some ways quite literally an uphill battle. However, this first half of Alicization could also be considered a bit slow due to the substantial amount of world building that needs to be done in order to help us understand what exactly is happening. But as I said, it's pretty satisfying when all the pieces are brought together and you find out that certain aspects from previous seasons have led to these new things in this season. A lot of elements do come into play, and at first it may seem overwhelming, but the world that they're building is so intricately designed and complex that without it, the story would just degrade into this half-baked fantasy anime. It comes to highlight one of the key things that I like about Alicization in particular. The lore runs deep. There are layers and layers to the underworld that are slowly unwrapped as the story progresses. Whether it be new characters, different locations within the underworld, or even an aspect related to how the underworld functions as a VR world, each serve to enrich what would otherwise just be another fantasy setting. Of course, with so much detail comes the issue of not being able to properly showcase all of it. Certain elements obviously had to be glossed over so that topics more crucial to the plot could be highlighted, and that could very well leave you with certain questions or a lack of understanding. My other complaint would be that a lot of new characters get introduced. I mean, Kirito is placed into a brand new world, which means all the characters we're familiar with from previous seasons are pretty much set aside to make room for all the new characters we meet in the underworld, of which only a select few are actually explored. Side characters on both sides of the conflict are quickly introduced then sent to the background after only 1 or 2 episodes, though I understand why they would choose to do so considering how much more exposition that would have required. Anyway, altogether, the first half of Alicization was good enough to keep me watching, but not quite the great that warrants an entire video of me gushing about it. No, the real reason I'm making this video is because of the second half of Alicization, War of Underworld. This half pretty much remedies all the aforementioned issues from the first half, reason being that Kirito has been completely sidelined due to, well, reasons, and that allows the entire show to be dedicated to other characters, making room for new themes to be explored and more development to be distributed amongst the side characters that were just merely introduced in the first half. Not only that, but with most of the primary exposition out of the way, the anime can really focus on the literal war that's taking place. I mean, even though the title clearly dictates that this season will be about the war, for some reason, War of Underworld kind of feels like an understatement. The scale and magnitude of the battles had increased by so much that I found it hard to believe that this was the same Alicization I was watching at the beginning of the year. Even now, with the first part of War of Underworld done airing, the war has been going on for 7 episodes straight and I don't think it's even reached its climax yet. Both sides of the conflict keep making moves that continue to shift the balance in power, leaving neither side with that definitive victory in their hands and extending the war far beyond how long I thought it would last. Now, that may make you wonder whether the quality can keep up with the consistent action that's taking place. I mean, even shows like My Hero Academia have reduced the quality of animation in certain areas in order to focus on other areas. So what about Sword Art Online? Well, that brings me to what I think is this anime's greatest strength. Throughout the entire Alicization series, the quality of art and animation has been consistent every step of the way. Characters are designed with these beautiful shading techniques that were first introduced in the movie. Environments have all these vivid colors and artistic details that help to set the tone of the setting we find ourselves in. Then, as for the fights, well, in this most recent season, every episode after episode 6 has had non-stop Sasuga that I simply can't help but fanboy over. They're choreographed with impactful movements that are complemented by these camera angles that move with the focal point of the fight. It presents it in a way so that we're constantly centered on the main point of action. Moreover, action sequences are animated in a gorgeous and stylized manner that really goes to highlight the immensity of the battles. Every attack from an Integrity Knight is visually more powerful than those who are weaker. It's as if you can see for yourself where everyone stands in terms of power by simply just watching how their attacks are animated. But not a single one is less visually appealing than the other. They all have a certain flair that complements the type of fighter that we've come to know them as. Production and budget have never really been a problem for SAO, but Studio A1 Pictures really outdid themselves this time. Even tough contenders like Vinland Saga and Fate Grand Order Babylonia couldn't seem to bring that same level of excitement as Alicization did. I found myself watching each episode of the war on the edge of my seat and with a huge grin on my face, not knowing which side would come out on top. This all stemming from a beautiful combination of art, music, and animation. And I expect nothing less from it when the series continues with even larger scale battles in the Great Underworld War. it's hard to imagine something that goes beyond what I just watched this season. But now I've learned that SAO can impress, and I'm confident that they'll continue to do so. So even if you hate Sword Art Online for all it's worth, even if you absolutely despise the story and all of its characters, I still urge you to give Alicization a chance. The plot has significantly changed for the better, and Kirito hasn't said a single line in 12 episodes. There's no ass pulls, and characters are relatively well developed with proper motives. But if nothing else, then perhaps you could find at least a little enjoyment from the high quality action. Anyway, I've said about all I can say without going into spoilers. In the end, whether you choose to watch this show or not is up to you. I can only express my honest opinion on why I found it so enjoyable. But hey, if you've already watched Alicization, then I'm curious to know what you thought as well. Did you find Underworld to be significantly better than any of its predecessors? Also, as I said earlier, I'm a big fan of the depths the SAO universe goes to in order to put a scientific background behind a lot of its concepts, and I wouldn't be too averse to making some videos on them, but only if you guys are interested. So if you think SAO content would be interesting for the channel, then go ahead and leave a like or comment so that I know that's the type of content you want to see. Anyway, as always, thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed this type of anime content, then you already know what to do. So, until next time, ciao!